There is something quietly devastating about learning that the woman who made millions of people feel joy, warmth, and hope spent the last years of her life hidden behind locked gates, surrounded by dogs instead of family, and separated from the one person who carried her bloodline into the next generation. Ryan Melcher was 41 years old when he finally decided to speak. Not to a television camera, not to a magazine with a glossy cover, but to the world through a simple social media post, written in the raw hours after he learned his grandmother had died. He didn't get a phone call. He didn't get a knock at the door. He found out the same way you did, the same way the grocery store cashier in Ohio did, the same way a teenager in London who had never seen a single one of her films did. He scrolled through Facebook and saw that Doris Day was gone. That single detail tells you everything you need to know about what was really happening behind the image of America's most beloved sweetheart. Doris Day was born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, in Cincinnati, Ohio. From the very beginning, her life carried the kind of weight that her bright, sunlit public image never fully reflected. Her parents divorced when she was still a young child, an act that carried enormous social stigma during that era, and she was raised primarily by her mother Alma during the grinding years of the Great Depression. Loss visited her early. A brother named Richard had died before she was even born, and the absence of a complete family shaped her in ways that would echo throughout her entire lifetime. She was a dancer first. A passionate, driven young girl who won a local contest at just 12 years old by standing on her hands for more than 3 hours, earning herself free dance lessons as the prize. That stubborn endurance, that refusal to give up simply because something was hard or uncomfortable, would become the defining thread of her life. She was training seriously, dreaming of Hollywood, when a train collided with the car she was traveling in at age 14. Her leg was shattered so severely that doctors genuinely considered amputation. For over a year, Doris couldn't walk. She lay in bed listening to the radio, singing along to recordings by Ella Fitzgerald, channeling everything she had lost into the one thing that remained available to her. Her mother recognized what was happening and found her a vocal teacher named Grace Rain, who later said Doris was the most naturally talented student she had ever worked with in her entire career. At 15, Doris was already singing professionally at a small Chinese restaurant for $5 a night. By 17, she was performing in nightclubs, lying about her age to get past the liquor laws, and catching the attention of band leader Barney Rapp, who told her that Kappelhoff was simply too long and too difficult for a marquee. He heard her sing a song called Day After Day and suggested something simpler. She didn't like it at first. She thought Doris Day sounded too flashy, almost artificial. But she accepted it, and that name would go on to mean something to an entire civilization. What most people understood about Doris Day was the version Hollywood constructed and polished for public consumption. The cheerful comedies, the romantic films with Rock Hudson, the wholesome image that made her the #1 box office star in America from 1960 to 1964, a record previously held only by Shirley Temple. Pillow Talk alone, made for $3 million, earned back $18 million. She was earning $750,000 per film and receiving profit participation on top of that. By 1965, her movies had collectively generated over $200 million. But what the public never fully saw was the private life running parallel to all of that success, and it was filled with a kind of suffering that would be difficult for most people to comprehend. Her first marriage, at 17, was to a trombonist named Ul Jordan. She married him against her mother's warnings, and her mother turned out to be absolutely right. On the very first day of their marriage, Jordan witnessed Doris kiss a fellow musician on the cheek as a gesture of gratitude. He dragged her through the streets of New York, back to their hotel room, and beat her. This was not an isolated incident. He was controlling, violently jealous, and relentlessly abusive. When Doris became pregnant, he attempted to force her into an illegal abortion. When she refused, he beat her so severely that she nearly lost the child. The most terrifying moment came when she was 8 months pregnant. Jordan drove her to a secluded location with a gun in the car. He intended to kill her, kill their unborn child, and then turn the weapon on himself. Doris talked him down through sheer force of will and desperate calm. From that day forward, she could not sit in the front seat of a car without feeling a terror that never fully left her. She gave birth to her son Terry in February of 1942 and remained in the marriage hoping things would change. They didn't change until Jordan began directing his violence toward the baby. That was the line she would not allow to be crossed, and she found the courage to leave. Her second marriage, to saxophonist George Weidler in 1946, lasted only 8 months. He left because he said he didn't want to be known as Mr. Doris Day. The rejection was cruel in its simplicity. She had offered him a real life and he had chosen his ego instead. Her third marriage, to Martin Melcher in 1951, would turn out to be the most consequential and ultimately the most catastrophic relationship of her life. Melcher was charming and confident. He became her manager. He became the father figure to her son Terry, adopting him and giving him the Melcher name. Doris trusted him completely and without reservation for 17 years. She never questioned his business decisions. She never asked to review the books. She believed, as many people believe about the ones they love, that trust was enough. Martin Melcher died in 1968. In the weeks that followed his death, Doris discovered that her trust had been a catastrophic mistake. Melcher and his business partner Jerome Rosenthal had spent, squandered, and stolen her entire fortune. The money she had earned across nearly 2 decades of being one of the most successful entertainers in the world was gone. In today's terms, the loss amounted to roughly $150 million. On top of that, she was $500,000 in debt. And as if that weren't enough, Melcher had secretly signed her to a CBS television deal without ever telling her, without ever asking her consent. The woman who had planned to retire was now broke and legally obligated to appear on a television show she hadn't agreed to and didn't want to do. She sued Rosenthal in 1974 and won a settlement of $22 million. But by the time lawyers and insurance companies took their portions, her son Terry later confirmed that she received far less than the headline number suggested. The betrayal didn't just cost her money. It cost her something harder to replace. It cost her faith in the world she had built. After the Doris Day show concluded in 1973, something shifted in her that never quite shifted back. She retreated, first gradually and then almost completely, from public life. She moved to an 11-acre ranch in Carmel, California, and she surrounded herself with animals. At various points she cared for as many as 30 dogs at once, each of them given individual attention, individual space, individual love of the kind that is uncomplicated by ambition or betrayal or financial schemes. She ate meals from paper plates. She kept a washing machine in her bedroom. She built a separate kitchen specifically for her pets. She turned down the Kennedy Center honors because she didn't want to travel or appear in public. Her last public appearance was at the Golden Globe Awards in 1989. Her final television interview took place in 1994. After that, she essentially disappeared from the world that had spent decades watching her. The people of Carmel knew her differently than the world did. To them, she was simply the friendly woman who fed stray animals and walked through town without drawing attention to herself. She was not performing warmth for the cameras. She was living it, quietly, among creatures who asked nothing from her except care. In 1978, she founded the Doris Day Pet Foundation, which eventually became the Doris Day Animal Foundation. In 1995, she created World Spay Day, an initiative that spread to over 70 countries and helped reduce animal overpopulation on a scale that no celebrity endorsement campaign could match. This was not philanthropy for appearance. This was the work of a woman who had decided that the most honest thing she could do with the time she had left was protect something vulnerable. She also surprised everyone in 2011 by releasing an album called My Heart, at 89 years old, featuring recordings made in the 1980s, many of them songs written by her son Terry. One track, called Happy Endings, carried both their voices together, hers from 2011 and his from a recording made years before his death in 2004. The album reached number 9 on the UK charts, making her the oldest artist in history to place a new album in the top 10. In America, it marked her first Billboard chart appearance in nearly 50 years. Terry Melcher grew into a remarkable figure in his own right. As a music producer at Columbia Records in the 1960s, he worked on recordings that became permanent fixtures of American culture. He helped produce Mr. Tambourine Man and Turn, Turn, Turn for the Birds. He collaborated with Paul Revere and the Raiders. He later worked with the Beach Boys on Kokomo in 1988, which became their first #1 song in 22 years. But Terry's life carried a shadow that even his considerable professional success couldn't fully outrun. In 1968, he had been living at a house on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles with his girlfriend, actress Candice Bergen. Through Beach Boys drummer Dennis Wilson, Terry had met a man named Charles Manson, who was trying to build a music career. Terry declined to help him get a record deal. Months later, Terry had moved out of the Cielo Drive house. Not long after that, Manson's followers murdered Sharon Tate and several others in that same house. Some investigators and writers over the years have speculated that Terry may have been the intended target of that night's violence. No definitive conclusion has ever been established. Terry lived with whatever weight that knowledge carried for the rest of his life. He died of melanoma in 2004 at the age of 62. Ryan Melcher was born into a complicated inheritance. The grandson of one of the most famous women in American entertainment history, the son of a man who had moved through the orbit of some of the most significant and darkest moments of the 1960s, Ryan grew up shaped by forces that most people couldn't fully understand from the outside. When Terry died, something changed in the family's arrangement. Doris reportedly reached out to Ryan with an invitation to dinner. It seemed like a genuine attempt to restore something that had frayed over the years, particularly after Ryan's parents divorced in 1997. The dinner never happened. Before Ryan and Doris could sit across from each other at a table, her business manager Bob Bashara intervened. He called Ryan to a meeting at the Cypress Inn, a hotel in Carmel that Doris co-owned. According to Ryan, Bashara's opening question was simple and stunning in its directness. He asked Ryan why he wanted to see Doris. Ryan answered the only way that made sense to him. He said, "Because she is my grandmother." Bashara told him he would not be allowed to see her. He then cited Ryan's parents' divorce as the reason for the estrangement, framing the separation as something that had already been decided and was no longer up for discussion.